Welcome to the Get Published podcast, sponsored by Brodie Consulting Group. To get more information about our publishing and coaching services, go to getpublishedpodcast.com. Hello, I am Paul Brodie, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Get Published podcast, where we help authors get published with a proven system that works. Today, we're being joined by Monika Wahi, author of Analyzing Health Data in R for SaaS Users. Monika, welcome to the show.
Hi, Paul. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Are you ready to get started?
Yes, thank you.
All right, here we go. Question number 1. What is the one piece of advice that you would give to a first-time author who is currently writing their book?
Okay, well, you could probably guess that Analyzing Health Data in R for SaaS Users is a technical nonfiction book, okay? So the advice I'm going to give might not apply to writing like a fiction book or poetry, but it probably will apply to anything scientific or a how-to book. And this is what I will tell you. Make a really good outline. Now, the publisher is going to ask you for an outline, but my suggestion is you actually start with a bigger outline. Actually decide what you're going to put in each chapter. Make a lot of notes. And if you're a science writer like I am, you should have all of your references in like a citation library. I use Zotero. A lot of you use EndNote. Whatever it is, you should be having that library ready and actually putting references in your outline. I did that. That's how I did it. I made my long outline, and then I made a really short one, like the publisher asked for. But then when it was time to write the book, I totally used that long outline as a map. And so I really recommend it to anybody else writing a book like mine.
And the nice thing with that, you can essentially do it in real time versus having to go back at the very end and have to go back and research and reference every single thing with that.
Exactly. That's another, you pointed out really the great thing about using your citation and referencing software while doing it.
Well, let's talk about the flip side of things. So what do you feel is the hardest part about getting published?
Well, I'm going to give you kind of an unusual answer. I publish in the scientific peer-reviewed literature. So that's normally like journal articles in scientific journals, and they're only about 10 pages, right? And believe it or not, I don't have this publish or perish problem. Like, I publish constantly. I have no problems. I'm a good writer. I love the journals. I just don't have problems. But what I had problems with when I was writing my book was actually allocating the right amount of time for my writing sessions. In the past, when I would write these, 10-page articles, I didn't realize that every time I sat down to work on the article, I reread the whole thing, and I'd edit it a little. So I wasn't just writing. So my book is 4 chapters. So I remember sitting down to write the 3rd chapter, work on writing it. And all of my time spent that day was just editing the 2nd chapter, like reading the end of it till I could get into the mood to write the 3rd chapter, but then the time was gone. So I'm going to just recommend that if you're used to writing shorter pieces, when you write a book, allocate a longer amount of time to your sessions because you're going to want to reread what you just wrote before you start your next thing.
Now, you mentioned your book is 4 chapters, so it sounds like it's a pretty thick book before we even got started. So how many pages are each of those chapters?
Well, overall, the book is 300 pages. And so, I don't know, they're split up pretty much evenly. I think the 3rd chapter is a little bit longer than the others. But there's also a lot of stuff that's not just basically writing. Like there's a lot of figures and tables. And also I kind of made it so you could use it as a textbook. So there's questions and answers at the end of each chapter. So it's not all this dense writing. But yeah, I had to write all that. So you should really plan for extra time so you can reread what you wrote, especially if you're a perfectionist like me.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk about marketing. So please share a marketing strategy that you have used in your book launch that worked well.
Okay, I recommend this to all science writers, especially those who are finding a niche. Like right now, I'm finding a niche. I used to be mainly a SaaS user, but I adopted R, and now I can use both. And so I find it kind of finding a niche in helping SaaS users learn R and helping R users learn SaaS. So I recommend you find your niche and then speak at a conference about that topic and put your book up on the slide. So what I did is I live in Boston, so I went to the Enterprise Applications in the R language, or EARL for short, the EARL conference. They have one in London and one in Boston every year. So I applied, I put my abstract in, and they accepted it, and I presented actually on the topic of what it takes to convert statistical code from SAS to R. So that was on the topic of the book. So I put the book cover up on the slide, and that was one way to really launch the book and get a bunch of R users interested in it right away.
Now, I did want to ask if you could kind of break down SAS and R a little bit, just for our listeners that might not be too familiar with both of those.
Sure. Everybody's used a calculator, but if you start to do statistics, you soon grow out of the calculator, so you have to use software. Historically, SAS has been the software most people use for statistics, at least in the healthcare area, but also in economics, also in a lot of places. SAS is made by a company. R is newer, and it's open source, so it's not made by a company. It's made by a community of programmers. Recently, R has become much better, and SAS hasn't really changed a lot because it was kind of a monopoly. And so suddenly people are becoming interested in transitioning from SAS to R. But they're totally different programs. Even though we're both doing the same statistics in them, they're totally different programs. So if you're used to SAS, it's really hard to learn R, and vice versa.
Gotcha. And I appreciate you explaining that, because it's always good to break those things down. Because, man, when you start talking about statistics, I'm already thinking about those college days.
I know. Like, I'm afraid to mention it half the time because it gives people PTSD. But if you're in my statistics class at La Brea College, you do just fine.
Excellent. And in regards to your strategy about speaking at these different conferences, do you have any recommendations for our listeners on ways, different tactics they can use to be able to speak at conferences? Like, what did you do to be able to speak at them?
Well, in science, you can often apply with an abstract, and then it gets reviewed and they decide whether or not you should speak. But another way you can get noticed is by actually, especially if you write books like mine, like How to Do Something, is by just recording tutorials on YouTube. And in fact, I recorded some tutorials on YouTube just showing people how to use SAS or R. And, I'm a professor, so I basically used some examples that I had done with my students and just kind of made it nice for a recording. And that caught the attention of not only conferences and book publishers, but it caught the attention of tutorial publishers like LinkedIn Learning and DataCamp. In my field, those two places publish a lot of online tutorials in statistics and programming. And because of that, it really helped me get more exposure online. And through that exposure, people are coming to my book. So one of the things that's helpful is if somebody thinks, I'm going to buy this programming book, it might be very technical, hard to read. If you've got tutorials explaining your software, showing them you have a personality, that you'll break it right down, then they're more likely to go buy your book. So it's a really good thing to just get out there on YouTube with some, good quality videos.
Well, I'm really glad you shared that. I was a teacher for 9 years in the public realm, and the biggest lesson I learned was the main key is just to simplify everything as much as you can. And I have that same philosophy as a book publisher.
Well, great. I'll bet everybody who comes to you is very happy with what they learned, because I do a lot of tutoring and people are pretty happy with that. So
excellent. Well, it's just nice to hear of educators that simplify. So we really appreciate you doing that, because when you talked about SAS and R, I'm like, wow, this stuff sounds pretty technical. And when you broke everything down, I'm like, I love it. Someone on the show that can just simplify everything. It just makes all the difference.
Well, great. I'm glad we were both able to make each other comfortable in the interview.
Well, but now I'm going to ask you the most challenging question. So out of 70 plus guests we've had on the show, this is the one question that for some reason it's not about the marketing or the publishing or the writing, but it's always about what is your favorite book. So what is your favorite book, and what was the number one thing that you learned from it?
Okay, so I already cheated on this question. I just wanted to get out of the way that my favorite fiction writer is Tom Robbins, okay? But now I changed the question to mean my favorite nonfiction book, okay? Which I can answer. And that is Getting to Yes by Roger Fisher and William Ury. Okay? And the reason why I think it's my favorite book, nonfiction book, is, well, there's a few reasons. One is it's short, and two is it's cheap, and three is it's useful. And those are three good things in my life because I don't have a lot of time. What it does is it teaches you negotiation strategy. So whether you are thinking of going into hostage negotiation or you're just trying to get along with a teenager or a difficult coworker, it just teaches you how to do that. So I'm not recommending this to your audience just to say, oh, authors, you can use Getting to Yes to help you negotiate with your publishers. I'm saying it's just helpful for no matter what you do. You know, like you said, you were a teacher. Sometimes you have to negotiate with students. You know, they're sick and they need their deadlines changed, whatever. I use these principles all the time when negotiating with students. And when I have employees, I negotiate with my employees that way. And one of the things, like you'll notice, my book is analyzing health data in R for SaaS users. So that means I need to get a lot of health data. Well, they don't just give that out. Like if hospitals are going to give you your data, you need to create data use agreements. And these negotiations are not easy. And that's one of the reasons why I got this book and read it. And I've been able to negotiate very complicated data use agreements using these skills.
Yeah, I love that book. I actually got that book a number of years ago when I was getting my bachelor's degree. My business communication professor, that was our required reading for the class, and just such a great book.
Wow, so you agree with me. That was a good one, huh?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We got to yes on that one.
Definitely.
Well, and for a final question, what is your favorite quote and why?
Okay, so at the risk of sounding conceited, my favorite quote is by me. But I need to tell you, I made the quote in 1994. Okay? So here's the quote. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
She who writes the minutes writes the meeting. Okay? So I was a secretary, and I'd take notes on conference calls. This is the 90s, right? And there'd be 17 doctors on the call, and I'd be taking all the notes. And then people would say, send out the minutes, Monika. So I'd organize them really nicely. I write it all down, and I'd send it to these 17 doctors, and I'd say, do you have any corrections? Nobody would correct it. So what I realized is, a bunch of people can talk, but until it's written down, it's probably not even real. And whoever writes it down makes it real. So to all of you authors out there, just take this to heart. She who writes the minutes writes the meeting. And so I encourage all of you out there who are taking minutes like on life, making observations, just go ahead and write the meeting for us. Tell us what we are experiencing, because that's what I was doing as a secretary, is I was sharing with them, this was our collective experience that I wrote down. And they accepted it, so I must have done a good job, huh?
I like it. That's a great quote. And you know what? If you come up with a quote yourself, I think sometimes that's even better. And that was one of the best quotes we've heard on the show.
Oh, thank you. I actually say it to my students all the time because I want to make the point that there can be a lot of talk, but until somebody writes something down, it's not real.
Absolutely. Well, Monika, I want to thank you for being a guest on the show. What is the best way for people to find you online?
Well, thank you for asking. You can go to the webpage of my company, Deathwench Professional Services, at www.deathwench.com. Now, that's death without an A, like the band Megadeth. The webpage links to my book, my online tutorials, and my blog that I never keep up. You can also look for my videos on YouTube, my courses on LinkedIn Learning, and soon to be also on DataCamp.
Excellent. Well, Monika, I want to thank you again for being a guest on the show, and I wish you all the best in your author journey ahead.
Thank you so much, Paul.
Thanks again for joining us today. To learn more about how to get your book published with a proven system that works, grab a free copy of my book at getpublishedpodcast.com.